Each year I come up here and I talk about the research that we do. John talks about hardware and Peter talks about the software market. And the research that Science Research does is about attitudes, actions, expectations, and projections. We talk about stickiness, and we watch trends, and we want to know what customers are paying attention to. This year, we added some information, collected data on geometry capture, and then we have a report that has all sorts of really cool charts, and we make that available to our subscribers, and then a year after that, we make it available for free to everyone on the Science Research website at scienceresearch.com/whitepapers. The research that we collected in 2015 is still being digested, and instead of talking about that, I'm going to talk about assess and the data that we collected for assess. Now, each of you should have in front of you a two-sided sheet. Turn to page 7. So I need to say a few things. Joe is going to join me up here in a couple of minutes, and we're going to talk about ASSESS, which is the Analysis, Simulation, and Systems Engineering Software Strategies event. But prior to the ASSESS event, we held a survey to understand in those domains, where should our attention and our budget be spent? Where do people think that we should be paying attention? And we, at the summit, the Analysis, Simulation, Systems Engineering Software Summit that we held in 2015 at the Santa Fe Institute, we gathered together, and the output of that summit was this set of 24, I believe, categories, which are outlined here, and then we've given them shorthand names so that we can actually have a conversation about them. And we gave everybody 10 votes, and here's the results. So, top of the list, combining heterogeneous models. Also, incorporating quantified error, knowledge capture and reuse, reliability, pre-CAD. These are the things that capture people's attention, that the respondents believed that we should be paying attention to. This is what I'm interested in. This big R research, and you can read the definition of big R research in here. It's about investing for the long term and putting money on things that are not going to be have a financial return in the next 18 to 24 months. And so how do we look at this? Well, there's a difference between votes and voters. On the left, we have the votes that we just saw. And on the right, we can look at how many people voted for different things, which is a very different story. And we can see if we look at, custom material properties, only 10 people, well, let's see. Well, let's look at custom material properties. There we go. Only 10 people voted for them, but they got 22 votes. So those 10 people felt strongly about them. And how the voters think about this and what they feel passionate about is interesting. But for right now, I'm just going to go through the raw results. There were people from many different domains. There were people from the analysis domain, from the simulation domain, from systems engineering, and people who didn't really tell us what domain they were from. So this is the votes for the systems engineering domain. Unsexy stuff, combining heterogeneous models, and then trailing number 3 is usability. Now, if we compare that to the people from the simulation domain, they're fairly similar, except in a few specific areas where in the simulation domain, there's a much greater emphasis on those top 2, and on the on the systems engineering, and on the web cloud mobile and targeted apps, much more interesting to the folks in the simulation domain. Now, we can also look at it by size. Here we have mid-sized firm, which we defined as 10 to 5,000 people. Again, the top two don't change. And then we can look at that compared to small firms, under 10 people, or we can look at that compared to large firms. We can also look at them by role. So we have the roles here are vendors, users, people who actually have to use the technology, us, the industry analysts in the room, people who classify themselves as experts in the arena, academics, and this thing that I'm calling consumers. And consumers here are the people whose role it is to consume the output of the analyses. And if we look at that, let's look at the user view, and let's compare that to those that are consuming the data. You know, these are the areas where the users and the consumers of the data have different preferences. The users are much more interested in getting the data up front, in front of CAD. And the consumers really aren't paying attention to or aren't willing to invest their attention in speed. But they are definitely interested in that knowledge capture and reuse area. And then we can look at the differences between users and vendors, those that are actually selling them the software. And between users and academics. And between users and industry analysts. And what I want to point out to here is there are a lot of areas in the lower half that have a lot of attention from the analyst community, including my big R research, that fall, way below on the user awareness. And I would say that these are the areas that are going to be more important over time. We can also look at consumers versus vendors. The consumers really are the folks who are typically paying for this. And the vendors are the ones who are trying to sell it to them. Now, I mentioned passion earlier. If we define passion arbitrarily as, I've got 10 votes and I'm going to spend 3 of them or more in one particular place, that's some level of passion. And so we can say that one voter gave 3 votes to usability. But none of the other voters really felt passionate about it. But there was a lot of passion on a lot of different areas, particularly in those at the top. Now, also look at the number of votes that came from passionate users for WebCAV Mobile. So this is the slide that we saw a second ago on consumers versus vendors. But now let's look at those that are passionate about what they're doing. And we can see that those that are consuming the information are passionate about the unsexy stuff, about combining heterogeneous models, about licensing, and about knowledge capture and reuse. And while the vendors have some of those, although not passionate at all about licensing, I can't imagine why, there is a disconnect there. Anyway, this is a very rich data set, and those involved in the Assess initiative will have access to this data. My time is up.